All right, guys. So today we're going to look at the second question, the second test passage in philosophy genre. So the passage is as such: the conceptions of life and the world, which we all call philosophical, are product of two factors: one inherited religious and another ethical conceptions. The other, the sort of investigation which may be called scientific. Using this word in its broadest sense, individual philosophers have differed widely in regard to proportions in which these two factors entered into their systems. But it's the presence of both in some degree that characterizes philosophy. Okay, so maybe I can understand from this part that so far I can get a mind map of this sort, that philosophical approach philosophical approach has two parts. One is the religious, okay, and the second one is the scientific, correct? Yes. And then we see that philosophy, as I shall understand the word, is something intermediate between theology and science. Okay, like theology, it consists of speculations on matters. Okay, so we are looking at why it's like theology. So, like theology, it consists of speculations on matters as to which definite knowledge has so far been unascertainable. But like science, it appeals to human reason rather than to authority, whether that of the tradition or that of revelation. All definite knowledge, so I should contend, uh, belongs to science. All dogma as to what surpasses definite knowledge belongs to theology. But between theology and science, there's no man's land. Okay, so this religious part is coming from theology, and the science part is coming from this, and between this is a no man's land. Okay, and what is this no man's land? This no man's land is nothing but philosophy. Right, okay. And then he goes on into details of the questions that he keeps on thinking: is the world divided into matter, blah, 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 all that. And then he comes: is there such a thing as wisdom, or what is it? Is it a merely ultimate refinement of folly? Folly is a state of, foolishness. Okay. To such questions, no answer can be found. So all these are nothing but some random questions. Okay. To such questions, no answer can be found in the laboratory. Theologies have professed to give answers all too definite, but the definiteness causes modern minds to view them with suspicion. So, what does this mean? This means that, yes, philosophical questions, yes, science cannot find answers in the lab, and theology, which has given answers, are too definite or they are too broad. That is why even these answers are not acceptable. Then he goes on to ask about the different kind of people that would talk about these kind of things. The answer of the historian, insofar as I'm capable of giving it, will appear in the course of this work. Ever since men became capable of free speculation, their actions in innumerable important respects have depended upon their theories as to the world and human life, as to what is good and what's evil. So he's talking about how the society, how humankind has started to view philosophy, how they have started to think of the speculations again and again and bring out the subject matter. To understand the age of our nation, we must understand its philosophy, and to understand its philosophy, must to be ourselves some degree of philosophers. There is here a reciprocal causation. The circumstances of men's lives do much to determine their philosophy, but conversely, philosophy does much to determine their circumstances. So basically, what's he saying? He's saying that circumstances and philosophy are interdependent on each other. Okay. And then he says theology, on the other hand, induces a dogmatic belief that we have the knowledge, when in fact we have ignorance. So he says that theology brings in a appeal that we have knowledge, but we don't have knowledge. We only have ignorance, and by doing so, generates a kind of impertinent insolence. What is insolence? Some kind of a rude speech or rude behavior. Okay, it's either good to, so what does he say finally? It's good to either forget the questions that philosophy asks or to persuade ourselves that we have found indubitable answers. What is indubitable? Indubitable is something that cannot be doubted. Okay, very certain. You can't doubt it. To teach how to live without certainty and yet without being paralyzed by hesitation is perhaps the chief thing that philosophy in our age can still do for people who study it. Okay, all right. So I hope you've understood this passage. I've also given you a mind map next to it. Let's go to the first question. The purpose of philosophy is to. Now, in the passage, we have seen that the purpose of philosophy, I think we are getting it this answer right from the bottom. Okay, so what is it? Here we can see that he has not spoken about reducing uncertainty or chaos anywhere. Okay, where can we talk about that? Uh, yes. So here it's to teach how to live without certainty. Okay, and yet being without being paralyzed by hesitation is perhaps the chief thing that philosophy in our age can still do for those who study it. Okay, now this reduce the terror of cosmic loneliness comes from the first part. Okay, the top part. It's not something that's coming from our down. Where is it here? Why then you ask? All right, so it's over here. Then to studying of these questions, if not answering them, is the business of philosophy. Why then do you ask, waste such time on insoluble problems? To one, okay, to this one, a historian might answer that an individual living in the face of terror of cosmic loneliness. So this is what a historian would say. Okay, so this becomes a partial scope choice. Okay, now we are left between B and C. Help us find explanations for uncertainty or help us to cope with uncertainty and ambiguity. So over here, if we see, it's to teach how to live with certainty. Okay, so it's not just to find explanations for uncertainty, but we are trying to live with certainty. Okay, so it's to cope up with that uncertainty and live with it. And without being paralyzed by hesitation. That means we should not get more than one thoughts. Okay, so all this points to B. So your answer should be B. Okay, all right.